Hello friends, Clage back with another Anji guide for you, and today we are going to talk about what is arguably Anji's most infamous mechanic, the thing that he is known for both past and present, and that is his Autoguard. The spin stance that allows you to Autoguard, go into a invulnerable animation, and potentially punish your opponent for swinging into it. So I'm going to talk about all the frame data and interactions and understanding of how Autoguard works, the kinds of situations that it's strong and powerful against your opponent. Going to talk about how to use it in pressure situations while you're playing more offensively for potential mix-up situations. And we're going to talk about all the weaknesses and pitfalls that come with using Autoguard as one of Anji's tools in his entire kit. So the idea for this video is going to be to give you way better knowledge of how Autoguard works, how to better utilize it in all aspects of play with Anji, and to hopefully make it a more useful part of your kit without becoming overly reliant on that. And something I want to preface before we really get started is this is not a crutch. This is not something you can base your entire gameplay around with Anji and succeed, because what it's good against is very specific, and there are a lot of situations where, yes, you can Autoguard, but it's not actually that good, or sometimes it's even detrimental to Anji. So we're going to talk about all that and hopefully make this mechanic more usable, more understandable, and have you getting people swinging into the spin more often so you can get some big damage, some knockdowns, some big rewards for taking this risk. And I want to use the word risk right out the gate. This move is a risk. Anji is weighing a very heavy risk-reward game that oftentimes may not be in his favor when you attempt to Autoguard. Let me explain why. So, Autoguard is triggered three different ways. There is the base where it's just the spin. You do this by doing 236K or quarter circle forward K, depending on your notation preference, where it's just the spin, nothing else happens. You can also do a version of this by holding either slash during Ko or heavy slash during Fujin to get the charged version of those moves. And the charge on those comes from Autoguard happening prior to their actual startup. So if you do instant Ko, you just go in the air, right? But if you charge Ko, you do a brief Autoguard spin, then go in. Same thing with Fujin. Instant Fujin, charged Fujin with Autoguard before the actual Fujin animation starts. So all three of these have 10 frames of startup. Until you have been in this move for 10 frames, Autoguard is not active. This is just literally a move with nothing. The important thing to note is every single version of this spin, whether it's the spin itself, whether it's charge Ko, charge Fujin, is in counter hit status on the entirety of its startup and the entirety of its recovery. If you get hit during the startup or get hit during the recovery, it is a full counter hit, and it's going to hurt. So always keep that in mind when you weigh the risk-reward of adding Autoguard into the equation of what you're doing at any given point during a match. So, 10 frames of startup to get to the Autoguard. The minimum this move can have is a 25 frame total. 10 frames of startup, 15 frames of Autoguard, and then 9 frames of recovery. No matter which version of the spin you do. This doesn't apply to Fujin or Ko, by the way, because those moves go into actual special moves. But when you're doing just the spin, every single spin, no matter how long you hold it, will have 9 frames of recovery after you finish the spin. So 10 frame startup, 9 frame recovery. All 19 of those frames are counter hit state, just to reiterate. So minimum you can do is a 25 frame move, 15 frames of Autoguard. If you hold for as long as possible, Anji does 31 frames of Autoguard. So in total, a 41 frame move. 10 frames of startup, 31 frames. You can let go at any point between that 15 and 31 frame window at your discretion. And then you're always going to have 9 frames of recovery on the end, okay? So this is not fast startup. This is not like old Anji Autoguards where some of them were active on frame 1. Frame 1, you are Autoguarding, you're good to go. Not in Strive. Remember, you need at least a 10 frame window to even attempt to have this be a successful option, because otherwise you're going to get hit out of the startup. It's going to be counter hit. You're going to have a very, very bad time. So, we have the animation itself, how it works. Now, what happens when you actually trigger an Autoguard situation? So, I have dummy Anji here programmed to just do a basic, slow, long-range normal in his far ass. So, let's have you go back to slot 1. That's the Autoguard trigger. Whenever an opponent swings a move into that Autoguard window, whether it's, you know, the 15 frame minimum or all the way up to the maximum of 31 frames, you get the tink sound, and then Anji spins and goes into an invulnerability state. If your opponent activates Autoguard, Anji is invulnerable for 38 frames. That is locked in. This animation where he spins around after the flash, 38 frames. You cannot make it any smaller or wider of a window. It is guaranteed to always be 38 frames. While that's happening, Anji is invulnerable. Completely invulnerable. He cannot be attacked. He cannot be thrown. You literally cannot interact with him in any way, shape, or form for the entirety of that 38 frames. As soon as that 38 frames is up, Anji is free to act with whatever he wants. He can do normals. He can block. He can backdash, he can attempt to throw, all of it. Everything is on the table. He recovers instantly after that 38 frames. So it's important to note, you go from completely invulnerable to free to act in a single frame. Now, the buffer and strive is not that big, so you can't just mash stuff out of this all the time and have it be active on the first frame that Anji's available to act. So keep that in mind. This is not super precise. You don't have to use heavy precision, but you do need to be in the general ballpark of that recovery to get the earliest possible action after you trigger an Autoguard. So, when your opponent swings into the Autoguard, they freeze. They are frozen for 28 frames. Wherever the part of the move they were at, it just stops. It doesn't matter how many frames they are in. Could be the first active frame of a move. It could be the last active frame of a move. But they are frozen in that state for 28 frames, and then they have to go through whatever active and recovery frames remain afterwards. So, Anji is 38 frames of invulnerability. Your opponent is a guaranteed 28 frames of they're stuck. They have to eat this 28 frames of I am locked out from doing anything, right? What this means is that bare minimum, to actually punish something with Autoguard, you need your opponent to have at least 12 total frames of active and recovery frames left on their move after they swing into Autoguard. Because the fastest way you're going to be able to punish them is doing throw, and throw has a 2-frame startup. So if your opponent does something and triggers Autoguard, and they have less than 12 frames of recovery, you do not get any kind of guaranteed punish upon them. And in fact, they might even be able to punish you if you choose the wrong option out of your Autoguard. So, it's very important to note, you are looking for moves with big-time recovery that allow you to get a very good punish. If you Autoguard something, you want that to be worth your while. You want to have earned something for taking this risk on a move that puts you in counter hit state. So, now we know the frame data behind how the basic Autoguard works. How long it takes to start up, the window for how long you have to Autoguard, and then the interaction when someone triggers the Autoguard invulnerability. It's important to note that the charge versions of Ko and Fujin, the longest you can Autoguard either of these is 15 frames. So you get the minimum of the spin behind this. So 10 frame startup, 15 frame Autoguard window, and then either Ko or Fujin are going to activate and do their thing. So it's not nearly as long of a window as holding on to the just kick Autoguard spin for the maximum amount of time. It is important to note that if you Autoguard with either of these, so I'm using Ko, exact same situation. You are invulnerable for 38 frames, they're frozen for 28. Nothing changes. Every single Autoguard trigger is exactly the same. It always does the same thing no matter which move you use to get them to swing in and cause the tink to happen, okay? So, now we know the frame data and the kind of meat and potatoes of how Autoguard works and what happens when you get your opponent to swing into Autoguard. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to talk about what are Autoguard's strengths, when is it at its best, using it as a move against your opponent's offense and playing neutral. What are its weaknesses when you are trying to play against your opponent's offense and playing neutral. And then we're going to talk about Autoguard for a little bit as a pressure tool, because it's not just a tool for, you know, defensively getting through your opponent's attack. It can actually be a very important part of Anji when he is on offensive advantage. So let's start talking about using Autoguard in neutral. Like I said, we're going to talk about the strengths first. Autoguard is at its strongest when you can get it to activate up close and personal, and when your opponent is using a move with a lot of recovery on it. Big moves with lots of lag frames. So Anji's Fares is a perfect example. This is the exact kind of move you want to Autoguard, because if you Autoguard this and you're in any kind of reasonable range, you get the best punish possible. And the best punish almost every time, unless you're in something that you Autoguarded with just hellacious recovery, is going to be close S. So if we Autoguard this, we get to go into close S stand heavy. Let me turn Anji off from blocking so you can see that this is an actual punish. So you can see the punish text come up. See? Real punish. Full combo. This is the strongest thing you should look for if you Autoguard something. If you are within range to activate close S and they have a lot of recovery, this should be your go-to. Go into a full combo. You can Roman cancel, carry him to the wall, the whole 9 yards, make it hurt, all that good stuff. This is the best result you can get off Autoguard in the vast majority of situations. There are juicier punishes, but they're very, very specific and very rare. This is the kind of stuff you're looking for when you Autoguard buttons that people are likely to use either in neutral or when they're trying to establish offensive advantage, that you might have a chance to make them swing into your Autoguard and actually bring the pain for it. The fastest punish you have is, of course, throw. 2 frames. If you Autoguard something and you aren't sure how long the recovery is or what you're going to be able to do, or you think they're going to recover quick, look for throw. You should be looking for this a lot when you Autoguard things, because quite honestly, a lot of things that you Autoguard, even things you think you might be able to get really juicy punishes off of, you're not going to be fast enough. Do not be afraid to just default to, if you Autoguard something, to throw. Just like that, okay? Something I want to note before talking about other options for punishing when you get Autoguard activated is moves, and I'm going to use Fares again, that lunge forward or cause your opponent to kind of lean out, often will get Autoguarded and you'll look like you're in throw range. And because of the way how hurt boxes and hitboxes interact in Strive, and this is true for a lot of fighting games, you will actually not be in throw range. So, like, see how Anji's leaning right out? It looks like I should be able to grab him. Nope, not actually in throw range. This happens with a lot of moves like this. Anji Fares, Soul forward slash, Fafnir does stuff like this. There's a lot of these kind of moves that you need to be very, very aware of, that if you try to throw, you might flat out whiff because they are not actually in throw range, even though the character model looks like it's right next to you and it would be an easy grab. So something super important to note there is just, you'll learn these as you Autoguard more moves, and Autoguard, as you get better with it, is basically a testament to your knowledge as a player and your knowledge of your opponent's character and their tendencies. This move only excels when you know a lot about what your opponent can do and what their options are and how their moves work. If you just blindly try to Autoguard into stuff, a lot of times you're either going to get counter hit because you did it at the wrong time, or you might get Autoguard to activate and you're either not going to get a reward, or you're actually going to end up in somewhat of a worse position than when you started and could have done something else to try and play neutral or close the gap or whatnot. So just keep that in mind, that this is very much a move that rewards knowledge. You need to understand your opponent's options to really get the most out of Autoguard. So, in terms of punishes when you get auto guard activated. Like I said, the best one, you should look for stand slash into a full combo. If you're close enough and you just want to be safe and get a punish that you know you have time for, look to throw. The other ones you should look for are when you're at mid-range. So if you're at far S activation range and you auto guard something that has some lagginess but not near enough to punish with far S, you should look to do one of two things most time. Either look to auto guard and go into stand kick. So like this. Stand kick, sweep, knockdown. Then you get a butterfly setup or an OTG, right? Or other mid-range option. Crouching kick, crouching dust. Same thing. Put a butterfly on him. That is your kind of mid-range. I don't think it's a laggy enough move for me to punish with far S. I don't think I'm in throw range. You should default to one of your kicks. That's your best bet at that point. This doesn't come up as often, but it's also a good safe situation. Like if you're right here, right, and you think you're like, I'm not sure if I'm in throw range, but I just auto-guarded. What should I do? You can do this. This is a perfectly safe, viable option to go to, so keep that in mind. So those are the three punishes, quote-unquote, that I recommend you look for based on what the situation is of what you auto-guarded. You know, if you're big, juicy, close-ass starter, you're safe. I'm not sure how much time I have, so I'm just going to chuck you. And then the mid-range, I don't think I can throw you, nor do I have enough time to hit with far S, so I just want my knockdown. If you use these three things as your main options when you get auto guard activated, you'll be in good shape. You will most likely get something out of it, and at worst, you're not going to get blown up for trying it. So, the strength of auto guard, like I said, you want to be at close range, ideally close S range when you finish activating auto guard going into the invulnerable spin. You want to be up close, and you want to be against moves that are super laggy, right? The opposite is auto-guarding moves that are either very quick to recover or have extremely long range, because the reward, quote-unquote, for auto-guarding those kind of moves is very, very poor and sometimes non-existent. So let me show you a perfect example, right? Let's talk about a situation where if you look at auto guard and you go, this guards everything. It guards mids, highs, lows. I don't have to worry about if it's a jump in, if it's a crouching move. It's all the same, right? So a base reaction might be, oh, I can probably stop jump ins with this. That's probably a good option. No, it's actually a terrible option. Auto guard is very weak against jump ins and air moves for the most part. There are exceptions, and I'll try to list a couple of those. But what you need to know is auto-guarding jump-ins, air dash-ins, typically is not very strong. And let me show you why. So let's record Anji again. And we're going to do just a very basic jump-in, right? We're going to do jump S and have him mash throw. And there's a reason I'm having him mash throw. So let's replay this. Whoops. Didn't actually record. Try that again. There we go. Okay, so come get me, Anji. Throw tech. Your 2-frame punish is not fast enough to do anything when you auto-guarded a jumping slash. Which means if you try to do anything else, you are getting thrown for auto-guarding this. So I'm going to try to do Anji's fastest move, stand punch, right? 6 frames. Watch what happens. Chucked. It is very important to note that if you auto-guard things with low recovery, especially jump-ins, you do not get jack off this. You are in a very bad situation. Do not default anti-air with auto-guard. This is not a winning play against the vast majority of moves coming at you from the air. And there's a twofold part to that, right? I just showed how weak it is because your chances to get a punish are low. There are jump-ins that are laggier and you can throw them out of them, but why would you try and do that when you have things like forward punch or one of the best anti-airs in the game in Ko? If someone is trying to come at you from the air, you should be swatting them out of the air, getting counter hits, and doing 200 damage to them. This is not where it's at for anti-air. Do not default to auto guard for that. It's not a winning play long term. The other thing that Autoguard is not particularly good against, and let me go get a different character to kind of highlight this. So let's grab one of the premier at-range characters, right? Let's grab Axel. So Axel, of course, very zoner heavy, very long-range pokes, very obnoxious. You might think, well, playing neutral is always a guessing game. It's kind of hard. But if I use this, I might be able to blow through some of those long-range moves and start harassing Axel for doing it, right? Well, let's just pick a very standard issue poke from Axel trying to keep you out. Let's go with Jumping Slash, right? Really good angle on this move, reaches a long ways, counts as an overhead because it's a jumping normal. Pretty good stuff. So let's see what happens when you try to do anything to this. That's not a punish. That's not even close to a punish. Let me set Axel to block so you can see how much not a punish this is. Oh, it's because I recorded him for too long. I'm like, what? Hello, training mode? Okay, let me try this again. So, one. Axel, jump S, now block. There we go. That'll work. All right, so, one more time. Yeah, not even close. You saw he was already walking backwards, right? Let's say I'm a little closer, right? Let's say I'm closing the gap slowly, and I auto-guard jump S a little closer. Let me try using a much faster move like stand kick. Maybe we can punish with that. Nah. No. Not happening. When you auto-guard at long range, you are getting nothing. If you are not in range to actually make your opponent block a follow-up or do something, all you've done is gain yourself a little bit of ground and a tiny bit of meter. This, if you're going to play this game where you're auto-guarding characters with range, you are basically doing it for one of two reasons. One, you're trying to slowly inch your way in by auto-guarding through moves so you can close the gap and then start to threaten with your longer range pokes. Or you're auto-guarding things like projectiles or other options to try and lure your opponent closer to you that way. And while we're on the topic of projectiles, let me grab Anji again and show you something also very important to note, which is that projectiles act very different with auto guard. You'll still trigger it the same way. You'll still get the spin, the tink, and the invulnerability. The problem is that it's not attached to your opponent anyway. So they are free to do whatever they want. So, if we have Anji throw butterfly and then start running in, right? See how quickly he's on me? Yeah, nothing. I have done nothing to freeze the opponent. Projectiles, you can auto-guard them, and you're still invulnerable. You are still completely invulnerable for 38 frames. But they are free to do whatever they want. They can start running at you. They can start running away from you. They can even put out another projectile if they want. So keep that in mind, that just because you auto-guard a projectile does not mean your opponent is now stuck in projectile recovery. Nope. They are free to act no matter what's going on as long as they recovered from the projectile. So, there are times where you're going to want to auto-guard through projectiles to try and set up, closing the gap. Sometimes you might want to auto-guard through Leo's projectiles, for example, or auto-guard through Ino's notes, for example. These are a case-by-case basis, but they're not going to stop your opponent from moving. So always keep that in mind. That's super, super important. So when you're playing at range, you just need to remember, it's here. It sometimes is a correct thing that you'll need to do, and there are matchups where you're going to feel like this is your only way in some situations. When you're fighting very good Axels, Nagoriyukis, those kind of characters that have incredibly good long-range buttons, you're probably going to have to take some risks on auto-guarding through something to get in and try and run offense. Because Anji's air dash movement and his general movement is honestly not good enough to try and just circumvent it that way, right? You do have to use this sometimes to close the gap. But just know that you're doing it to do just that. You're closing the gap, you're not getting an immediate reward off it. So that's kind of your neutral / defensive overview of Autoguard. Up close and against laggy moves, awesome. Fantastic. This is exactly what we want. Up close against not so laggy moves, but moves that still have enough recovery, cool, we can throw. We get a throw out of it, good reward. Knockdown into pressure is good. Anji likes that. Moves with really light recovery, such as jump-ins, this becomes infinitely weaker and the risk-reward skews heavily against you. Not a great option. Doing this at range to try and close the gap is not very fun. You might have to do it sometimes, but this is not strong. This is not going to earn you anything right away. It's not a big gain. The other thing important to note is I'm not really talking about using Autoguard as like a pressure breaker, and that's because it's too slow. 10 frames is too slow. This is not a reversal. This is not something you're interrupting small gaps in pressure in. If you try to interrupt, you know, like a chip block string, right, where he leaves a notable gap and tries to reestablish pressure, you're getting counter hit. This thing is not a get out of jail free card at all. If you need to interrupt a small gap in something, you need to be building 50% meter and you need to be doing this. This is your interrupt Autoguard. This will not do it. Always keep in mind, this is a slow startup. 10 frames is not fast. So this is not a, I'm on defense, I'm feeling smothered, I want to try and get out of this. No, this will get you killed. Always remember that. This is not a reversal. It is not an instant interrupt. Not even close. So, now we kind of went over like what Autoguard is good against, how you punish your opponent when you get a successful Autoguard, where Autoguard tends to fail or where it becomes much weaker and the risk-reward skews against you, right? So another thing I want to talk about that is very important, and it is my biggest point of contention with this game, is that if your opponent has 50% meter, that is a big deal. So let me show you why. So now we're actually going to record the dummy to Autoguard, right? So Anji, why don't you jump up, do a spin for us. Beautiful. So, when Open Beta Test 2 dropped, right? And I got into training mode for the very first time with Guilty Gear Strive Anji. The very first thing I did, and I mean literally the very first thing I did, was go into training mode, Autoguard, and see if the dummy could Roman cancel to cancel out the lockout animation. To cancel out their recovery and just be like, never mind. You couldn't. You had to eat the entirety of the freeze animation and your normal recovery. You were not allowed to Roman cancel, right? Well, guess how it works now. Wrong button. Ain't that some shit? I don't know why they changed this. I don't know if they just thought it was too good. I don't know if it was a bug in training mode and they always intended you to be able to purple Roman cancel the recovery. But it is important to note, if you are facing an opponent with 50% meter and you force them to autoguard something, they can Roman cancel and they gain complete and total advantage. It is a real problem. This move's value tanks when your opponent has 50% meter. And you could make the argument that's like, well, okay, the worst punishment they're really going to be able to do is throw you, right? Because you still recover and you can block. So you just have to sit there and either eat pressure or throw. That's not that bad. And they wasted 50% meter. That is technically true. But Anji does not get to people easily in this game. Anji has to earn his way in. He's not a fast character. He doesn't have fast buttons. So anytime your opponent can shut down one of the major pieces of your kit by spending 50% bar on reaction, and let's be real, not terribly hard to react to an animation that's 38 frames long, that sucks. And it's a big problem. So whenever your opponent has meter, if they're a player who understands the Anji matchup and they know how Autoguard works, they will PRC out of this all the time. And it's a huge pain in the ass. So just be aware. Be aware that 50% means the stop sign needs to go on Autoguard a little bit. It's much, much, much more unsafe. So, that's the general overview of using Autoguard in neutral and kind of defensive places, trying to outmaneuver your opponent, earn punishes through Autoguarding big laggy moves. Sometimes you're using it to close the gap against ranged characters. What else is Autoguard good for? Well, Autoguard is actually a very key component to Anji's overall pressure. So, of course, the most basic pressure, right, is just going into Fujin and doing follow-ups. And if you watch my Fujin guide, you know that, well, those aren't very good. And we know they aren't very good, and we know all the pitfalls of them. We don't need to go over that again, right? Let's see. Let's have you do this. So, what do you do for pressure? Since we know Anji doesn't have great stagger pressure, he doesn't have any plus frame normals. None of his normals are super, super scary outside of stuff like delayed Gatling, stuff like that, right? Well, the nice thing is that this is a special move, which means you can cancel into it from anything. All of it. Doesn't matter if it's a jab, stand kick, slash, all of it. You can always cancel into Autoguard. This is one of the few ways Anji can establish a form of pressure, right? You can make someone block stuff and go for like a strike throw. Well, sometimes they might try to mash out of that. So, what do? Cancel an Autoguard. See if you catch them swinging. Maybe you get your punish. The reason that this isn't a super weak thing on its own, because honestly, this is not super fast. And if your opponent is aware of you trying to do it too often, they're going to throw you. They are going to chuck you right out of it. If you see an Anji player doing stuff like this regularly, it's not hard to just start throwing them. Super easy for a lot of good players to start doing that. But what makes this viable as a pressure tool is because it can be attached to other things. So, like, a lot of people, if they see you doing, let's do like a basic three-way mix-up with Anji, right? Let's say you make them block close S. Well, what are your options here? Well, you could go into crouching slash, either quickly or delayed, to try and catch them with a low. You could try and frame trap them with a delayed Gatling into forward heavy, or delayed Gatling into crouching heavy. You could employ a strike throw style mix-up where they're not pushing buttons because they're afraid you're going to delay Gatling. Or you can incorporate using the Autoguard spin. The most common thing Anji players will find is doing this early on. Block something, Autoguard spin, throw. This will quickly start being figured out, and opponents will either start backdashing to make your throw whiff, or they'll jump out and punish you, which doesn't feel very good. But the thing is you have plenty of options to deter that, because you can do stuff like this and catch them backdashing. And even better, you have other moves this is attached to. If you think they're going to jump out, you can Autoguard spin into Ko. Now maybe you catch them jumping. Maybe you can get a counter hit for some of the best damage Anji gets. If you think they're going to try and run away, you might catch them with Fujin. If they swing into this first, they still are going to activate Autoguard. So this is a very, very valid part of your pressure, and mixing up between comboing into Fujin, doing delayed Gatlings, doing strike throw, this should be part of the equation for your pressure. This is invaluable to add this to the mix, because this is one of the few ways you can keep opponents guessing right now. I like to think of this as the actual quote-unquote Fujin mix-up. Autoguard is your new Fujin mix-up, quote-unquote, because this actually forces them to think, because they can't tell right away if you're going to do a minimum Autoguard into nothing, a minimum Autoguard into Ko, a minimum Autoguard into Fujin, or a fully held Autoguard and catch them mashing. It's all on the table. All of this is really important to pressure. These are all things that are super valuable for Anji to have. This is one of the few ways that you can keep some form of offensive advantage beyond basic strings into Fujin, which, as we've talked about ad nauseum, not so good, especially if you don't have any meter. This is stuff you can enforce to an extent without meter. It's very viable, because this is fast, and people are not going to want to just push buttons against Anji when they block something like close S or stand kick, because there are legit frame traps here. And if you get counter hit by one of those moves, that's gonna hurt. That said, same pitfalls apply. If your opponent has 50% meter, they can blow this up. They can swing into it and blow it up. They can also just do stuff like blue Roman cancel, backdash, watch what you're doing, and then react. So that stuff is all still there. You still need to be aware that when your opponent has 50% meter, this is still a big risk. So we've talked about it for pressure. I've shown you in the other video how it can be used for offense by incorporating into OTG mix-ups. That's still very valid use of Autoguard. Showed you how it's weaker the further away you are from your opponent and the less laggy the move is that you Autoguard. Projectiles do not trigger the freeze frame. Oh, something else I forgot to mention in addition to the whole your opponent can PRC. Guess what you can't do during the invulnerable animation? Oops. Anji, hit a button. There we go. All right. Replay, please. See how long it took me to Roman cancel? You are locked. You are 100% locked for all 38 frames. You cannot Roman cancel that. Your opponent can PRC recovery from freezing by swinging into your Autoguard, but you can't Roman cancel your own Autoguard freeze at all. Because reasons. God damn it, Arxis. Anyway. So, this is basically Autoguard in a nutshell. This move, like I said earlier, this move gets better the more knowledgeable you are. The better you understand your opponent's options, the better you understand their frame data, the better you understand how they like to try and establish pressure and offensive advantage. This move gets better and better the more knowledgeable you are. This move will not carry you at all. Autoguard will not carry you to high ranks. It will fluster new players and more inexperienced players because it's such an off-the-wall thing compared to most of the other stuff in the game, right? It's this move that you just can't push buttons at, no matter what. You push buttons, you get stuck, and you're just stuck in this animation, and it's really annoying. And a lot of times you get thrown or punished. And a lot of people don't realize how quickly they can act even after the freeze, because sometimes you get to act super, super fast. This move is not a hard carry. This move needs to be in conjunction with Charge Ko and Charge Fujin, part of your pressure, part of your neutral and mid-range game, and you have to know how to balance that risk-reward so that you aren't putting yourself in situations where, yes, I want to auto-guard because it feels like a really good answer to what's going on. Oh no, I got counter hit and I'm going to die. That is a very real thing that will happen with this if you spam it. Spamming this will not get you anywhere. There are times where you want to challenge something in neutral with auto-guard. Very real option. But just know that the whole idea of spin to win, that is a meme. That is not going to make you a great Anji player. This is one piece of a larger puzzle, and if you utilize it with the knowledge that I talked about in this guide, you're going to be a much better Anji player. This thing gets so much better when you utilize it carefully and calculated. It's a really annoying tool. You can fluster people if you use Autoguard well. If you use it poorly, you are basically tipping the scales way against you, and sooner or later that risk reward is going to blow up in your face. You're going to lose a lot of health, and you're going to be in a situation where Autoguard doesn't do anything for you because it's not fast enough to start up and get you out of the pressure. So, hopefully this helped you understand Autoguard a little bit better. This move also is arguably the most nuanced move Anji has. I could do a 5-hour guide and not go over every single situation that Autoguard is good or viable versus things where it looks like it's really good, but it actually gets you killed for using it. Again, you're going to have to experiment. You're going to have to learn more about your opponents, learn more about their characters, and this will make more and more sense as you use it. So, hopefully this was useful. If you have any questions or want some more input, as always, feel free to leave some comments. I'll try and get to them as much as I can. Let me know what you thought. I know these guides are long. I know I'm very verbose, but when I'm talking about mechanics, especially mechanics with Anji, I want to make sure that I'm listing all of the important information, and sometimes that just takes a while to divulge. And setting up the dummy on the fly is, something I'm terrible at. So I actually had to re-record this once already because I flubbed the dummy like 20 times in the first attempt. But we're good this time. So thank you as always for watching. Appreciate all of you who've been stopping by the stream and supporting my full-time job over there on Twitch. That means a lot. Thank you so much. Thanks for all the feedback and the comments and all your input. It definitely is helping me not only learn some stuff I didn't know about Anji, but is helping me come up with better ways to try and divulge more information and knowledge to you all. So hopefully this will make your Autoguard use a little bit better, a little bit more precise, and I wish you best of luck in all your matches and tournaments for whatever you're playing. So want to do the like, subscribe thing. Again, YouTube is basically a hobby that might pay my internet bill if I keep doing these videos. So cool. If not, no big deal. Appreciate you all. Please take care of yourselves, and I will catch you on the next guide. Later.